Hello, everybody, and welcome to the latest episode of the Nordic Football Podcast. My name is Jonathan Fadu, and I'm joined, as always, by Steve Wiss. Steve, my friend, how are you?
Jonathan, this is rather an unexpected pleasure because I know you've got a very, very busy week ahead of you, getting packed for a trip to Sweden. But yeah, I'm doing really well. I thought it was certainly about time we had one of these episodes to round up matches that have been going on over in Norway, Sweden. There's been a ton of games, lots of stuff to talk about. So yeah, let's get cracking, mate. Hope you're doing good.
Yeah, doing well. I'm ready. I've got my boarding pass and all that. So the next time you hear my voice, if we may have an episode while I'm in Sweden, hopefully I will be at Beck or Häcken and Gothenburg this week. But we'll talk about that in part 2. In part 1, we're going to discuss Norway, and it's been a cracking week, really. I mean, since we had a free episode, obviously we've been regular on Patreon the last few weeks with predictions and fantasy analysis as well. But it's been a couple of weeks since we had a free show. We had the interview with Hugo Vicente at Starbet, the assistant manager. So if you haven't listened back to that, then please have a little listen. That was our most recent free show. And this week we're going to round up some of the games going on in Norway and Sweden. And we're in the 4th round of Norway at the moment. So yeah, it's been a couple of weeks. Steve, I'm going to just quickly run through the results in round 3 and round 4, if that's okay.
Of course,
so
yeah.
Brand 3, Vålerenga won. This is last week, 22nd of April. Then we had Arlesen 0, Glimt 3, Hamkam 2, Godset 0, Rosenborg 1, Sandefjord 1, Sarpsborg 0, Odd picking up clean sheets. Stabæk 3, Haugesund 0, Tromsø 1, Viking 1, and then Lillestrøm beat Molde 2-1. And then that's been followed up this weekend just gone. We've got a sort of some teams have a double game week this week, which we did have a fantasy episode on our Patreon on Friday and talked about which chip you should use and the fantasy strategies. But so far we've had Glimt 2, Brand 2, a great result for newly promoted Brand there against the mighty Glimt. And then on Sunday we had Haugesund 0, Sarpsborg 0. We had Molde 2, Stabæk 3. Huge surprise shock there. Champions beaten again. Sandefjord 4, Arlesen 0, battering Arlesen. Godset 0, Godset. Tromsø 1, their run continues. They've been quite decent this season. Viking 7, Hamkam 3. That is a massive thrashing, 10-goal thriller. Odd 0, Rosenborg 0, and then the game that we're going to talk about first, Steve. Vålerenga against Lillestrøm. I'll let you talk about that. That's just taken place today. Bit of a cracker, eh?
Well, Lillestrøm are the team to watch this season, it seems. That's 2 matches now. They've won 4-3, and both of them with literally the last kick of the game. They're certainly a club to follow. They're actually in the Norwegian Cup final as well. Beat Bodø Glimt last week in the semi-finals of that. The Cup final is an exciting one to look forward to, Lillestrøm against Brann. But yeah, this match was a Monday night special. We don't get many Monday night matches now in Norway in the Eliteserien. It used to be always a Monday evening game, but this was a special occasion because it's such a big derby. Some people are saying it's the biggest game in Norway now. Lillestrøm against Vålerenga. Match was a sellout 2 or 3 weeks ago. Not a spare seat to be had. And yeah, I mean, the first half was wild. 3-1 lead for Vålerenga. They looked good. And then there was a red card. We'll talk about that in a minute. And then the second half was always going to be if Lillestrøm could fight back. And it looked like Vålerenga were actually going to hold on to win because they were still leading with 1 minute to go. And then incredibly, 2 goals, 89th minute from Yerman Arslan. And then Akor Adams pops up right at the death to nick all 3 points for LSK. So hell of a win for them against their big rivals. They're second in the table now with 3 out of 4 wins. Gut-wrencher for Vålerenga, really was.
Yeah, and it was a really good goal as well to win it from Adams. I think we tweeted it as well. We tweeted out the clip of it, and a crazy game, Steve. The fans were going mad. You mentioned it's quite a big derby, this one, and did it sort of go as you expected the match, or do you feel like that shock late kind of comeback was unexpected? I know you said it hinged on that VAR decision and the red card, but did the game go as you sort of felt, or was the game changed by the red?
The game didn't go as I expected at all because this fixture has become in recent years quite a tight game. Historically, it was always a lot of goals in this one, but in the last sort of 3-4 years, it's been more low scoring. Anything can happen in a derby game, though. And that's what I was watching this halfway through it. And I was like, well, that's the explanation, because it's just the way things go. Passions run high. When an early goal is scored in a fixture like this, it just opens things up completely. What was noticeable in the first half, that Vålerenga are definitely a better technical side than Lillestrøm, in my opinion. Lillestrøm's best technical player is Jørgen Larsen, and he came on at half-time, made a big difference. But technically, Vålerenga are a lot better. Lillestrøm are more physical, probably mentally stronger, and they've got, at this moment in time, I feel like Lillestrøm as a club have got more bottle than Vålerenga. But there's no doubt they were given a helping hand by this red card to Simon Jukulud, which on the field, I don't even know if the referee gave a card. I think he gave a yellow. If I'm not even sure there was a card given, but he was instructed by VAR to have a look at the monitor for a potential red. Now, I did tweet this out on the NFP account, and there was a lot of different opinions about this. Some were saying clear red, some were saying definitely yellow. My personal opinion is this is not a red card in Norway. Never has been, but it will be now, because this is the sort of decision which VAR is going to change an awful lot in the Eliteserien. Tackles, whereas before wouldn't have even been a card or a yellow, will now be upgraded to red, because it's kind of like a standard procedure. I think VAR is almost making football more regulated across the globe, where a red in South America is now a red in Norway. Do you know what I mean? Just the way things are going. Some will look at this challenge and think, yeah, that's a red. But you don't know Norway. You don't know the history of this league. It's a tougher league. People get on with it. You get stuck in. You can get away with stuff like this more historically, just the way it is. But not now. I don't know if you've seen the challenge or not, what your opinion is, Jonathan. For me, I don't think it's a red card. I don't think it needed to be overturned by VAR anyway. It's not clear and obvious.
Yeah, I think it's quite harsh, to be honest, actually. But I'm only looking at the VAR replay where it's slowed down and maybe in action. I'd have to look at it. I didn't see the game live, but just watching the replay from VAR, from that point of view, it looks. I've seen 10 times worse challenges than that in the Premier League in the last day or two. That didn't get anything. So you mentioned it's a bit more regulated. I mean, we're 4 games in now into the season. I know it's quite early, but in your opinion, you mentioned there that kind of VAR might regulate football a little bit more, make it more standardized, the refereeing. You just said that it's not that kind of league in Norway. People get on with it. How do you feel? What are your impressions so far of how it's changed the game? Do you think then there's going to be more red cards basically in Eliteserien this season?
Yeah, I believe that there's going to be about probably a dozen more red cards this season as a result of VAR, because VAR will not rescind any reds, in my opinion, that would have been wrongly given out before, unless there was a case of mistaken identity. So it's not going to go the other way one bit. It's going to be how many red cards are upgraded from yellows or even nothing. And we've already seen, I think it's the 4th one now that's gone to, it might be more. I need to look at the stats. I think it's the 4th time VAR's got involved and dished out a red. A couple of them, to be fair, you couldn't argue with it. But I think this one's the first one I've looked at it and I've thought, you know what? Nah, not for me. So I think it's gonna make a massive difference to how teams play in the Eliteserien now, because you're not just getting a red card, you're getting an automatic 2-match ban for this, which might be more later in the season. VAR just completely changes the dimensions of play in nations where in the past there was a really high bar for stuff like red cards. So yeah, it's a game changer in football. It totally is. And around the world, this is going to be a theme, I think, going forward.
Yeah, I'm going to actually try and watch it live if you get a chance, then do. But in terms of the VAR replay, it seems. But this is one of the issues, isn't it, with VAR? You slow anything down. I could slap you. I actually saw an incident. I think it was in the Premier League where someone got a little slap in the face. In a jokey manner, but when they replayed it, it made it look so bad, compared to how it actually looked, because when you slow it down, it just looks, everything looks worse, I suppose. I think the combination of Adams and Lennart Olsen, they've started the season on fire, haven't they? First goal, they combined. Obviously, Adams got 2. I mean, how's that partnership looking?
They're the best strike duo in the league. Simple as that. No, hands down. And I said this on the preview show. And I think people were underestimating Lillestrøm this season because of this. I saw quite a few predict them down as low as like 5th, 6th, even 7th. I mean, that still might come to fruition if they lose Adams in the summer, which is quite possible. Certainly, he knows he's in the shop window. But right now, I mean, those two, when you've got two brilliant strikers, and remember the coach has adapted the formation this season to fit them both in. He's gone from a 3-4-3 to a 3-5-2, just so he can, because he knows that he has to get them both in the team, but they seem to link up really well together. There's no, in the past how you might like get an Andy Carroll and say a Michael Owen. I'm just using two players as an example. These two guys just kind of feed off each other. Adams can quite happily set up Olsen, but it can also be vice versa. It's like a genuinely proper partnership. They're a physical nightmare to deal with. Adams has got a really good turn of pace, and Olsen's a really good, mentally strong fox in the box, and technically not too bad as well. So it's a fearsome combination. I'd hate to be facing that at Eliteserien level. These two, who knows how far they can propel them? Maybe they can get themselves a Norwegian Cup trophy and get themselves a medal this year.
Yeah, and just tell us who they're playing in the final. When's that, and how's that Norwegian Cup final looking?
Well, I do believe there's going to be 2 Norwegian Cup finals this year. I think the next Norwegian Cup starts fairly soon again. But yeah, in terms of this Cupen, the final is on the 20th of May, which is a Saturday. Brann against Lillestrøm. It will be at Ullevål Stadion in Oslo. So, I mean, 2 massively supported clubs. It's going to be a brilliant atmosphere. And, what a story if either of them wins it, because both, of course, were relegated to the Obos within the last 5 years and come back. Obviously, Brann more recently. So it's a real redemption tale for both teams. And Europe's on the line. Whoever wins it will be in Europe as well. So it's a huge game for both teams. It really is. And I think it's going to be a real nip and tuck sort of contest, 2 confident outfits. And it's one of those games that, I wouldn't mind going to that, I must say. Because I think the atmosphere will be amazing.
Yeah, both sides are the 2 that we've talked about quite a lot in the preseason show as well. If you haven't listened to that, you can always go back on YouTube or Spotify and get our Eliteserien season preview. Every single team predicted by Steve Wiss and where they'll finish in the league. Steve, I'm going to move on to a question that we've had from a listener. We actually, do you know what? I tweeted about, does anyone have any questions for the podcast? And I think we had 1 question. And I've just come on it now again, and we've got about 20 questions. So I don't think we're going to be able to get through all of them, actually. We've been bombarded all of a sudden. So thank you very much to anyone who asked the question. We'll see if we can fit in a few. But Andy Martin, FPL tactician, he said, is the Molde drop-off just unlucky, or is there a change in their play this season? And in terms of that question, Steve, just looking at the table, and I believe Molde are in the bottom 2, very near the relegation zone. So, in fact, they are in the relegation zone, and they are the reigning champions. 4 games played, none won, 1 draw and 3 defeats. No wins this season. Steve, what is going on at Molde?
Yeah, I guess we have to talk about Molde now, don't we? They lost recently to Stabæk 3-2 at home, and 1 point after 4 games. In fact, they're playing on Wednesday night against Arlesund. It's a battle between the 2 bottom teams in the league. So, yeah, I mean, one thing I did say in the preview show is that last season they overachieved their XGA metrics massively, and I did say, what happens if it goes the other way this year? And it kind of has, because I'm looking at the metrics now. They've got the 2nd best average expected goals, but I think they've only scored how many goals? 3 goals. So they're expected to score 1.78. 4 goals, but they're expected per game to score 1.78. So they're underachieving there. And then actually at the other end of the field, they've got the best expected goals against average per game at 0.85. But they've conceded, at least 1 goal in every match.
7.
Yeah, so they're underachieving at the metrics. Usually these things will even themselves out. So I think we will expect them to rebound. But 2 things I've noticed. I think offensively, you've got to ask, like, we just talked about Adams and Len Olsen there. I don't even know at the moment what Molde's best strike partnership is. I mean, Berisha just come in and he's not looked great. He's had a couple of niggling injuries. Wolf Eikram got sent off against Lillestrøm, but I've said before, he's not a natural striker. Brynhildsen is missing too many chances. He's the one that you could look at over the 4 games and think, yeah, he should definitely have at least 2 or 3 goals by now. And I know some people say be patient with someone like this, but it's worrying when he's misfiring with easy chances. And then defensively, it's just like any mistake they've made has been punished. And that is the way football goes sometimes. Last season, any mistake they made wasn't punished. Or Karlstrom got in the way of it, made some good saves. This year, and also there's been a couple of goals scored against them, which you could say, Kasper Wart's goal against them was, I thought, a splendid finish this week. I really did. Some might criticize the goalkeeper, but I don't think you're stopping that one. And that's the way football goes. It's a small sample size of 4 games. They will rebound, but it's just a question of when you then get into this state, pressure can be applied both internally and externally, can't it? So how they're going to deal with that.
You mentioned there in terms of the defense and sort of leaking goals and the XG. I mean, they were your preseason tip to win the league. Have you seen enough to change that opinion, or is it too early? I mean, they're like I've said, they're second from bottom, 4 goals scored in 4 games, 7 conceded, 1 point. They're 9 points now off Glimt already. I mean, okay, it's early days, but does that worry you? And should that worry Molde fans?
Well, the team I predicted second and third was Bodø Glimt and Lillestrøm. They're the top 2 right now. I mean, it's a massive concern they're so far behind them already. It's almost, I've seen some people tweet out, it's already too much for them to make up. And it may well be. They now need other teams to kind of slip up a few times over the first half of the season. They just got to get themselves back on track. Obviously, they've got some big matches coming up soon. But it's a concern that if you look at the teams that they faced, they've only really faced one good team in Lillestrøm. All right, you could say Rosenborg at home they're not a bad team either. But at home, you would expect Molde to beat anyone. They're the favourites to beat every single team at home. So, yeah, but when you're losing fixtures to Tromsø and Stabæk, it's a massive concern, even if you are unlucky. So I think at the moment, I don't see them winning the league after this start. They've got to become completely faultless again. They've got the quality, they've got the depth, but this is going to be a really, really good comeback now from Molde if they were to win the gold medal from here.
Yeah, maybe the one positive for Molde fans and those maybe playing Eliteserien fantasy, Emil Breivik is performing quite well. The 22-year-old, he got a goal and assist at the weekend against Stabæk, but it was not enough. And I think just a word on Stabæk, because that's a decent result for them.
Yeah, and I'm going to praise Stabæk here, actually. I think probably for the first hour, 70 minutes, they were lucky to be ahead. There's no doubt about it. They took their chances well. But Molde, if they were more clinical last season, Molde would have finished them off quite easily. But do you know what Lars Bohinen did the last 20 minutes, which I was really impressed with? He sensed the panic that Molde had. And he knew that they couldn't accept a 2-2 draw. They knew Molde had to win the game. So he himself then thought, you know what, we can win the game too. We can catch them on the break while they're, over-committing. And before Stabæk scored the winner, which was effectively the last kick of the game, it was a great finish. But they had 2, 3, maybe 4 breakaway chances, which I was like, you know what, this is dangerous. And I could sense it in the last 10, 15 minutes that Stabæk were not just here for the point, that they fancied they could get the 3 as well. So I think give a lot of credit to the manager that they were lucky to be in that position. But then once you are in it, you've got to take advantage of it. And rather than just set back and, accept a 2-2 draw and get deeper and deeper and deeper, they were actually looking to be on the front foot as well. So fair play at Stabæk.
Good stuff. Let's move on to arguably the game of the round, I suppose. 10 goals. Any game that has 10 goals in it is surely got to be considered game of the week. What has gone on here, Steve? Viking 7, HamKam 3. And to be fair to them, HamKam have started the season not too bad. I mean, 2 wins, 2 defeats. They went into this game, looking fairly confident. They'd only conceded 3 goals in their first 3 games, sorry, Steve. And now they've conceded 7 in one game.
Well, I can't fully comment on this game because I didn't watch the first half at all. I looked at the statistics of the match at halftime, and I thought I was going to follow it. From a betting perspective, I was actually looking for a bit of in-running action. But before I knew it, Viking were 2-1 up, scored 2 goals in the first 5 minutes of the second half. And I watched it until I think it was like 65th minute, when the game was 4-1 and game was over. And I thought, you know what, I'll turn my attention elsewhere. I don't know what happened after it went 4-1. Not a clue. It sounds like a few people were saying to me that HamKam just completely panicked, overcommitted, and just went searching for, a way back into the game, and they got punished. Viking taking every chance they had. I'd not even seen the rest of the goals. Apparently, Mel Galves's goal was a brilliant finish. The last goal for HamKam. But Viking, I can't believe that they scored 7 goals. Fair play to them. I think it may well we look back on it and we think it's a bit of a freak result, though. And ultimately for HamKam, they got 6 points on the board, but it will fuel ammunition to the fire for those who did predict them to be bottom of the table this season. And of course, it's a concern. If a team concedes 7 goals mentally, they can get a bit shocked, can't they? But my initial reaction, without having seen the full 90, is I think we may just see this as one of those freak sort of exceptional games where Viking are not just suddenly a brilliant offensive team, and HamKam are not just suddenly a terrible defensive team either.
Yeah, and it's always fun when there's 7 goals and 7 different goal scorers on the sheet. D'Agostino, Svensson, Bjorshol, Salverson, Patinama, Trippic penalty, and Tangen. That is quite a nice sort of looking scoreline, really, isn't it? He's quite rare, I think, if you score 7 goals that someone doesn't get to. And for HamKam, Kirkvold, Norheim, and Mel Galvis, as you've mentioned there. Steve, in terms of the table, Viking, they're 4th in the league. You were, you sort of had mixed feelings with them in the preseason podcast. What are your thoughts on their start to the campaign? Obviously, that win. Before that, they had 1 win, 1 draw, 1 defeat. How are you feeling about Viking?
Yeah, a lot better than I was in the preseason show. I've actually been quite impressed with their defence. Sounds a bit weird now. They conceded 3 goals in a game, but I think their defence has looked pretty good in the first 3. They've dug in deep when they needed to. Bracalo and Stensnes especially looked good. And, now they're obviously scoring goals. Maybe I still think they're really, really hard to predict. You're going to get all sorts. They're going to be like a bag of licorice all sorts. Jonathan, they're going to be, you don't know what version of them you're going to get, but that sort of result can really lift anyone, can't it? When you just scored 7 goals. So let's follow them with interest, because the other thing, the 2 home games, the fans have really, really got behind the players. Like that is quite an intimidating stadium when the fans are on their side, and they've used that to the advantage really well.
Yeah, my mum always said life is like a box of chocolates. You never know what you're going to get, and it sounds like that's the case for Viking. Those are the words, not of me, but of Forrest Gump. Now Viking as well, perhaps. Let's move on, Steve. I mean, we've got a ton of questions, and I'm going to try and get a few of them, get a few answers from you. So we're going to move on to Glimt, Steve. First question, Bothas for SC. It's literally just come in, so you're lucky there. You get the first dibs. What happened to Budo in the cup? And are Lillestrøm the real deal? Now, you've already talked about Lillestrøm, but just what happened to Budo in the cup? And then that ties into another quick question I have on Glimt, which is after Brand's performance away to Glimt, do you think they might be contenders for Europe this season? And that's from Runner Paul 1381 on Twitter at Runner Paul 1381. So yeah, let's move on to that game, Steve. That looks like a bit of a juicy game, that 2-2.
Yeah, it's another game. I've not actually seen the full 90 minutes of it, just the highlights of this one, because I was on the cricket field while this was going on Saturday. But
Pellegrino 2 goals, Finner, Jensen Vasberg in a 2-2 draw.
Yeah, and from what I saw of it, and from what I saw the metrics of the game, I was a bit surprised. I actually thought Budo Glimt would do a job on them, to be honest. I thought they'd give Brand a bit of a lesson. But I think Brand, for a good hour here, were a lot better than I expected. And, fair play to Brand. It's probably the first time they've really surprised me in that sort of way. I did say in the preseason show that they will have a lot of momentum in the first half of the season, though. But I think at some point their lack of squad depth will come back to bite them a little bit, and teams will figure them out. So I think long term, I just can't see them being a title challenger or anything like that. But at the moment, they're not a team you want to be facing, Brand, because they're full of confidence. They really are. And Glimt had to really dig deep here to avoid defeat. Pellegrino is absolutely crucial player, and he can produce something for them in crucial moments. And that's a big point for them, actually. in terms of what went wrong in the cup, I think it's the first real time they faced a good team this season. It was also the first time they were on natural grass.
Just before you sort of answer that question, sorry, what was the actual score in that cup semi-final?
Yeah, Lillestrøm 1, Bodø Glimt 0. So Thomas Lennon Olsen was the goal scorer, I think, just before half time. And, they really shut out Bodø Glimt really well, actually. It's a tough place to go. Grass pitch, semi-final. I think Glimt, I've been looking back, and I think Glimt have a problem when they have to play more than 2 games in a week. I really do. I think if you look back the 2 seasons that he won the title, 2020 was a COVID year where I think they only had 1 European game. It was against AC Milan, that was it. And then the next year they were knocked out of Champions League qualifying fairly early, so they had an easier run of fixtures. Even then, in the mid-season, they struggled a little bit. I think they've got problems when the way that they play Sheffield Knutson plays, they use a lot of energy up, they press a lot, and I think they're much better suited when they've got a full 7 days preparation. They're obviously a lot better suited to artificial surfaces. So I think it was a game too far for them against Lillestrøm. A little bit of a concern because, they really had looked unbeatable until that point. But now, they faced 2 tough teams in Bodø Glimt and Brann, and maybe they're not as special as we think they are at this point in time. So, yeah, suddenly there's a couple of question marks about Bodø Glimt. They've now got Odd in the midweek round on Wednesday. Or is it, Tuesday, I think it is actually. Something like that. No, it's a Wednesday match, isn't it? But, if you'd expect them to come through that. But if they drop points again, then, yeah, suddenly there's a lot more question marks there. But I think they're the sort of team that do need like a full week of prep to be at their best now, Jonathan.
Is Amal Pellegrino the best player in the league? I mean, he's got 2 goals there, 93rd minute equaliser, brilliantly taken. Is he? You were pretty critical of him a couple of seasons ago, I remember. Is he the best player in the league?
Yeah, I mean, he's technically the best player in the league. Let's just say that. I think there was a time when he did miss some easy chances, to be honest. And I think he still does. He's almost more dangerous on the when it's harder to score. He can just pluck a goal from nowhere. He really can. And I think his influence on the field's massive as well. He's a bit like a quarterback in NFL terms. He seems quite intelligent. He directs players where to be in that final third. So clever to have someone on the field like that. It really is. Reminds me a little bit of what Kieran Trippier does at Newcastle in a way, that sort of leadership. And best player in the league. Yeah, he's right up there in the conversation, isn't he? For sure. Certainly technically, I don't think you can get many better than him at all.
Yeah, and it's like you said, it's an interesting times for Glimt. They're doing okay, but obviously 1 or 2 issues there to maybe keep an eye on that you've just highlighted. We will move on now and just want to let's talk about this massive win for massive defeat for Arlesund. There's been a bit of rumblings, hasn't there, Steve? I think this week, and they've been beaten 4-0 by Sandefjord. We did have a question actually about Sandefjord. I won't go into it too much, but DM Punk says DRKMTCH on Twitter. It's pretty much, he says Sandefjord is in southern Norway, but it's pretty much north of everywhere else in the world and not the easiest for grass in April. I'm not going to get into a discussion about pitches because this question is basically about pitches, but does that have any impact on this game? This 4-0 win?
Yeah.
Let's win and talk about Arlesund.
Yeah, quite frankly, Arlesund are a mess right now. I've got them wrong in the season preview. I would have put them in the bottom 3 had it not been for that Atanga signing, and I've been duped on him. I know we're only 4 games in, but I think he's going to be a flop already. I'm writing him off. Something's not right there. If he was that good, he'd be tearing. He's not even been starting some games, so something's wrong there. Maybe they can get a potential manager in who will get the most out of him. But I think I've got Arlesund wrong. There's huge pressure. There's a lot of rumours going around that Lars-Arne Nielsen is about to be sacked as the Arlesund manager. Now, this would be the first Eliteserien sacking since, I don't know when, actually. There wasn't a single sacking last year.
Over a year.
Yeah, we're talking a good, 18 months probably. And, it might seem premature. We're 4 games in, but the thing with Lars-Arne Nielsen, you know what you're going to get with him. It's a pragmatic approach. But when that doesn't work, his teams do not offer much else. And I think that's what the Allison fans, the media are saying that they need to maybe change something up to try and unlock some of the attacking potential in the team, but they haven't scored a single goal yet, Jonathan. They've lost every game, 0-9 goal difference. We look at the teams they've faced, Buda Glimt will let them off that one. But the other teams like Sandefjord, Godset, Vålerenga, those are winnable games. And it's been incredibly worrying how toothless they've been. They do have the second worst XG in the league, so they're not unlucky or anything. And at the other end of the field, defensively, they've not looked great either. So they've got this midweek game against Molde. They're probably going to lose that game. Let's be honest, as poor as Molde have been results-wise, they'll probably lose that game. And, then they've got a decision to make over the manager, haven't they? Because the next match is at home to Haugesund the weekend. That is a crucial, already it looks like maybe a 6-pointer for them. So worrying times for Allison, I must say. They need, would I replace Lars-Arne Nielsen? I don't know if I would. At this point in time, it does feel harsh. He's done a good job there. But results are results.
Yeah, and I guess on the bright side for Allison fans, if you'd have told them after 4 games they'd be 1 point behind Molde, they probably would have snapped your hand off. The sad thing is that Molde are second bottom and Allison the bottom, so maybe they wouldn't have taken it in hindsight, but in foresight. But no goals scored, 9 conceded, 4 games, 4 defeats. Things are looking bleak for their manager, that's for sure, and a massive game coming up in this midweek round. Just in terms of the midweek games, we do have Glimt Odd. We have Molde Arlesson, as you just mentioned there, and then we've got Rosenborg Brand, Steve. Now, that's going to be a bit of a tasty one. One question, just very briefly, don't want really too long an answer, because I think we should go into it in a bit more detail in the next show. But what is going on at Rosenborg? That's the question from more than one person, actually. But Duckers, at Duckers84, what's up with Rosenborg this season? Can you try and keep it to a minute?
They lack offensive firepower at the moment. They're just not set up at the moment to get the best out of the attack. They're missing Kasper Tengstedt. Defensively, reasonably solid. Got a good 0-0 draw against Odd. Andre Hansen made an amazing late save in that, by the way, to get them a point. But they're just lacking confidence offensively. And Brann are actually they're the bookmakers' favourites to win away against Rosenborg in midweek. That is how the tide has turned so much for these two clubs. It does feel like a bit of a short price, but at the moment, I think you've got to look at Brann winning, because at the moment they're far better offensively than Rosenborg.
Good stuff. I think that's pretty much going to be it. We do have one other little thing. BDIs of the scouts have been flocking to Norway, Steve, for a certain goalkeeper. We'll talk about it a little bit in part 2 as well. But just tell us what exactly has gone on here, or if you want, I can tell you.
Yeah, you can actually explain this one, I think.
Yeah, I'll explain it because I sent you the message, isn't it? I think quite a popular Twitter account that seems to follow scouts around. But apparently, according to one Twitter account, and there's a picture there, I think it's from Tor Henrik Stensland, who is a sports journalist in Norway. He says that there was a scout from Manchester United in the game yesterday, or in the game of the weekend, between Odd and Rosenborg on Sunday. And reportedly, and it's come out in a lot of reports now in Norway, so it seems to be more than one. Obviously, as I said, I think I said it on the 10 to Watch show, that, the scouts at almost every game from these big clubs, to be honest, you can't read too much into it, but it seems to have been a lot of reports on this one particularly that maybe have a little bit more credence to them, that they were there to watch Leopold Walsted, the goalkeeper. Now, someone that you've spoken about a lot on this podcast, Steve, I just want to get your reaction to that and your thoughts, because Manchester United maybe, could be looking for a keeper in the summer.
Well, it doesn't surprise me that scouts are at this game because there's other good talents on the show, not just Valstedt. But look, this goalkeeper is catching the eye. Look, he turned down a move to Buda Glimt in the winter, preferring to either see out the rest of his deal, 1-year deal left with Odd, or potentially in the summer might move on. I think that might actually look like a good decision for him if he's attracting scouts from huge clubs in Europe, because look, I've said for a while this goalkeeper's on a massive upward trajectory. I mean, they've kept 4 clean sheets in a row. Odd. They've drawn 3 matches 0-0. But they're one of the very few teams that I actually watch with low-scoring games, and I quite like watching their matches. They're decent watches. And I'm like, well, why is there not many goals scored in odd games? And a lot of the reason is because of Allstedt. Some of the stuff he comes with, he actually wasn't really tested against Rosenborg much. But against Sarpsborg the previous week, he was making save after save, exceptional saves. His reflexes are second to none, really, certainly in Norway. And that is the fundamental strength of this keeper. His reflexes, command of area is getting a lot better. And when you've got that natural talent, then you are going to attract scouts, aren't you? Especially, he won't cost a lot of money. So, yeah, I think it's obviously certain that he's going to be leaving this region within the next 12 months. It's just a question of where and when.
Leopold Wahlstedt, and we will talk a little bit more about him in part 2. So stay tuned. He is actually Swedish, isn't he, Steve? I believe. So it's apt that we talk a little bit more about him in part 2 when we move to Sweden, which we will do after this short break.
Welcome back to the Nordic Football Podcast. I'm Steve Wiss and I'm with Jonathan Faduba. And it's interesting, we were talking about Leopold Wahlstedt there, back end of the part 1. It reminded me of the 10 to watch list that I had last year. And for me personally, I think he's been the one that I'm particularly proud of from that list, because he's improved his game so much in the last 12 months. And I was really pleased to sort of cotton on to him early, and I can actually reveal to listeners now, you might have seen it tweeted out, we have done our 10 to watch lists this year now for both Eliteserien and Allsvenskan. It is available to all top tier Patreon subscribers. I'd like to take a moment to thank all those who have supported us over the last year or two and beyond in that respect. But the 2 Patreon lists are now out there on for the 10 to watch, and there's some really great cracking names on those lists. Both episodes are an hour each, so there's loads of juicy content. Well worth you taking a look at that. Now, Jonathan, last year's 10 to watch list, who was your favourite, do you think, from yours in Allsvenskan?
Yeah, and before answering that, just thank you so much to everyone who supported us on Patreon. By the way, we do have for the lower tier subscribers the weekly show, weekend preview shows, weekly shows, fantasy discussions. And we do also say on the Patreon, if you want a shout out, then, you're entitled to it. So if you do actually, we try, just for privacy reasons, we don't want to just name everybody. But of course, if you do want a shout out, send us a DM or send us a message on Twitter. We will happily give you a shout out as one of our loyal supporters, as we promised to. But yeah, Steve, the 10 to watch is always one of my favorite parts of this show. It was great to record it with you last week. And I think from last season, just looking through my list, both of them, by the way, our 2022 10 to watches are now available on YouTube if you want to go back and watch those. But they were recorded obviously a year ago. But of the 10 of those, I think Williot Swedberg probably will be the most successful one. Getting that sort of 4 or 5 million euro move to Celta Vigo from Hammarby. It's not really worked out for him, as it tends to be difficult for players that young to adapt to such a new league. It's difficult to get minutes. Steve, every week I seem to look for Benjamin Niga and how he's getting on, and he's on the bench at Nordsjælland these days. Can't even get a game. I'm just thinking, how long is it before he returns to maybe EF Core? They could do with him up front for sure. He got his big move and it's never really worked out. He's been to different clubs and he's getting closer and closer back to Sweden really now in terms of his career moves. Swedberg, I did see a few rumours linking him to Ajax this week. So I don't know exactly what's going on there, but just in terms of success, he would be the one that I would point out and say, I was really happy with. I think on that 2022 list as well, Aman Romeo, he started to look quite good for Häcken this season. So the 2023 versions are out now on Patreon. Of course, it's for the top tier patrons. We tend to get a lot of scouts and people working within football who like that section. So go and have a little look if you want on patreon.com/Nordic Football Podcast. Steve, it was a really good weekend for some of the names on that list, wasn't it? I saw some of the players that you selected. One of them got, I believe, 2 goals and 2 assists and a goal, maybe. One of mine did really well this week, so we're not going to name them, but your 10 is available there. Your 20 in total if you want to know the best talents in Scandinavia, the new Leopold Wallstedt, the new Williot Swedbergs. Steve, before we just go back to Sweden, I just wanted to ask you on Wallstedt. Obviously, as Manchester United follower, we do need a keeper. We do need someone who can maybe distribute the ball. He's on that 10 to watch episode you mentioned. I think we talked about it on that show on the which is available on YouTube now for free. We did say that he's quite good off his line as well. Comes out and is quite proactive. Is he good with his feet? You said he's quite good with his feet as well, because that's an area De Gea maybe lacks in a little bit.
That's the question mark that I think remains, because Odd are not known for being this high possession team. And I think I did a piece on Wallstedt last year, and the goal kicks that he's asked to do there are more on the direct side. So, I don't think Man United are wanting that from a goalkeeper either. They are wanting someone that's strong on the ball, like an Alisson, like an Ederson sort of thing. So, but we don't know. I think that's the ultimate answer here. But that's something I think needs to be found out a little bit more. The problem is moving straight directly to say Man United could be a little bit problematic. There'd need to be loans out, I think. You talk about Swedberg there, and you were looking at other minutes of players that have moved away from Allsvenskan. A couple of examples I just want to quickly talk about, and we will go into our Allsvenskan section. Kasper Tengstedt, 7 million signing for Benfica, directly from Rosenborg. Guess how many minutes he's played in the top division in Portugal since he's arrived in January? Go on, give me a...
Well, I was watching a Benfica game about a week or so ago, and he didn't, I don't think he even got off the bench. He was about to come on, I think, in the 89th minute.
22 minutes since he's come, and he's not been injured. He's been on the bench several times. He's probably got a bunch of splinters in his arse, hasn't he? But then you look at someone else. I was seeing a tweet recently about Fredrik Orsnes, who Feyenoord signed from Molde in August 2021. Benfica signed him a year later for 13 million. And apparently Orsnes has been one of their best players this season for Benfica. Like, he's been like a Swiss Army knife to them. He's been absolutely sensational. And, when he was in Norway, we knew he was a good player, but we didn't really see him at this sort of level. I just wonder that the middle club, the better move is maybe to somewhere like the Dutch league or the Belgian league, and then you move somewhere else afterwards where you're ready for the next level. And I think we look at Wallstedt now. Maybe it's a bit different for a keeper, because he's not going to become directly the number one Man United starter, is he? From Odd to Man United, that just doesn't happen. It just can't happen. So, he would have to be loaned out somewhere for a year or two, get that match experience, and then he can come back again. I just think it just is a real example of them two players, career progression and plans, and which club stepping stones you move is massive.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. And I think I can't remember exactly, but the game I was watching, Benfica needed a goal, and I was thinking, bring on Tengstedt, and you only got about a minute or so. So yeah, I definitely agree with you there. In terms of keepers, United at the moment have Jack Butland and Tom Heaton and players like that. So I think Wallstedt probably be an upgrade to the bench, but do you want to be on the bench at this point in time in your career if you're doing so well? So that's probably the question mark. But let's maybe pick that up another day. If you do want to look at those 10 to watches, patreon.com/Nordic Football Podcast. Of course, we really appreciate every single patron and any support you give.
Yeah, thank you very much indeed. Now we are going to move on to Allsvenskan finally, and I saw a tweet that you put on the NFP account a couple of days ago about Malmö. 5 games, 5 wins. The fans are dancing. You questioned, are Malmö FF back in business? So are you convinced by this start from them? Faultless 100% record so far. I'll come to the table after this, but I feel Malmö is the place to start. Everyone's talking about them, the resurgence, and Henrik Rydström.
Yeah, I think someone replied to that tweet, I think, on Twitter saying they never left. So I think we did get a few Malmö supporters following us after that.
Hold on, they were down in like 10th, weren't they?
Well, exactly. That was what I was thinking. But to be fair, they've been fantastic this season so far, and you have to give them all the credit. 5 games, 5 wins. They've looked imperious in every game. Sometimes there's teams where you probably have your favourites in Norway that you enjoy tuning in to watch, and then there's other teams where you sort of hold your nose before you sit down to watch their 90 minutes. And without any disrespect to Malmö, I think they were always quite entertaining to watch, but I think the football at times last season was a little bit, if a different team's playing, I might maybe tune into them. But this season, they've been first on my list maybe to watch. The Lillestrøm project. He's been a brilliant manager for the league, to be honest. If he ever does move on, which I think he eventually will, it'll be sadly missed, because the ability to transfer your philosophy to 3 different clubs, I think is really, really admirable. He's taken, Sirius and they had the highest possession, I think, in the league, or joint second highest. He's moved to Kalmar. They had the highest possession in the league last season, I'm pretty sure. I'm right in saying. And he's moved to, they did in fact, higher, just 0.3% higher than Malmö, according to our partners, Y-Scout. And now he's moved to Malmö, and they've got the best ball possession in the league at this moment in time. So, the ability to translate that, Steve, it tells you a lot. And I saw someone say that it's basically like watching Kalmar with better players, which it almost basically is at the moment. Malmö, their possession style that they play is still there. I've seen him experimenting with formations. He's played 3 at the back and he's played 4 at the back. But instead of sort of like, with no disrespect to Kalmar, they've got very good players as well, to be honest. But when you've got players like Hugo Larsson, Christiansen, Pena, although he's had a few controversies of late, Busanello, Tinnerholm, and then you've got Keisa Tellin just absolutely on fire at the moment, banging a hat-trick against Hammarby as he did. Taha Ali on the wing, Nanasi. They've just got a wealth of talent, Steve, and they're looking really, really good at the moment. And are Malmö back? Well, maybe they never left, but one thing's for sure, they're definitely back to the top of the table.
They are top of the table on 15 points after 5 games. I'm actually going to read some of the table here. Häcken are on 12 points. Elfsborg in third on 10, joint with Kalmar. Norrköping and Mjällby round up the top 6. At the bottom of the table, IFK Göteborg on 1 point. AIK are on 4, and Sirius and Varberg are on the same number of points there. Mid-table at the moment only for the likes of Djurgården and Hammarby. So, right now, it looks to me like there's 2 very, very good teams in this league, and that is the defending champions Häcken and Malmö. It could well be if Häcken keep it up, maybe a title battle between those 2. But you did say they brought in the best manager, but they could have. It was available within the country, and at the moment, he's making it look fairly easy. They're controlling games. He's getting the most out of Isaac Keisa Tellin, who, got to be honest, has been a fantasy must, hasn't he? I think for those who've been sleeping on him, who weren't convinced by him, they've definitely missed out in terms of Allsvenskan fantasy this season. But it seems his style of play is really suiting that striker in particular. He's just getting into positions where he can finish his chances. So that's a massive plus as well.
Yeah, Keith Stelling's been fantastic. He's the one getting on the end of the chances, and they've got Stefano Vecchia. He's coming into form. He's done quite well in recent weeks. If he's not playing, they can play Taha Ali. As I mentioned, he scored a fantastic goal in their previous match, coming off the bench. And if you've not seen that, I think we tweeted it as well. It was a brilliant strike. In terms of the game itself, the Hammarby game, it was a 4-2 win. They were 3-0 up in the first half. It was pretty comfortable, and I think Hammarby, there's going to be a few worries about them. Marti Cifuentes, in his interview post-match, he looked crestfallen, to be honest. He did not look happy. We had a comment from a Malmö fan, I believe, Nick Nielsen Bean. He said, as an MFF fan, I thought Nalic was very good today. Shame he's left, as when he's focused, he's a very talented player. And Nalic did get a goal back for Hammarby, as did Jukanovic. It was, it ended 4-2, of course. Nalic refused to celebrate against his former club, but it was a real shame how it ended for Nalic, because he was really highly thought of at Malmö. Came through their youth system and was a very talented player. Actually, he had a really bad injury that kept him out for a year, and then he's moved on to Hammarby. Came off the bench. He's not quite managed to get even in the Hammarby team yet, but he showed his quality. I think that, you mentioned the title. I think it's at the moment it's looking like a 2-horse race, and that's what I said in pre-season. I said I think it's going to be between Häcken and Malmö, and my feeling was that Häcken in the Champions League or wherever they end up in Europe, whether it's even Conference League or wherever, that could be a problem for their squad. Malmö don't have that distraction. They're not in Europe. And I think that's going to be massive for them, because they're just playing that one game a week. And you look at the Premier League, Stephen, I've been thinking this earlier, I think it was the year that Chelsea didn't qualify for Europe at all. And I believe I'm right in saying the year after that, Conte won the league.
Yeah, you're absolutely right.
At Arsenal in the last few years, they've had no Europe. And then this year, the title challengers. I know they've been in the Europa League this season, but they've had that time to rebuild, playing one game a week. Just Arteta, just any manager having a week to put in their ideas. And if you look at some of the teams at the moment, low teams like Chelsea, could Chelsea maybe next season be really good? Because they're going to have one game a week with that squad to basically whoever they get just work on the training ground. Whereas if you look at someone like Manchester United, played 64 games this season or whatever it's going to be, there's hardly any time at all to work on philosophies and tactics. And I think with Lillestrøm, he's got the ability to be on that training ground for the next week. Okay, it's a midweek round, but you know what I mean. Training every day, inputting that philosophy. Whereas when it gets to the summer, you're going to have Häcken in Europe. You're going to have other teams in Europe. I think Mjällby potentially could be even in Europe. So you're going to have those challenges for those other teams, and I think that's the advantage Malmö are going to have. Really, they just look so strong at the moment, and the fans are happy. Everything's just going right for them.
Yeah, and this is why I said in the pre-season show, I actually think they'll win the league by 10 or more points, because they've got so many advantages in their favour. Häcken, of course, have got the Swedish Cup final to look ahead to as well. And by the way, I must say, I get your point about Chelsea there, but whoever is in charge of them is going to have about 120 players, aren't they, to train that week? So I know this is not the English Premier League show, but I think Henrik Rydström's a little bit more happy that he's got a more streamlined squad than at Stamford Bridge. But totally right, they can focus entirely on the league. And, the talk of I'm not saying they're going to go invincible or anything, but I don't see them losing many games of football considering the squad that he's got at his disposal. But Häcken, you're right, I do look a unit. They've got a lot of goals in them right now. And you are going to be, fortunately, enough to take them in live this week. You are on a trip to Gothenburg. You're going to take in 2 games, I do believe, Häcken against Djurgården and EF Core. Maybe you can be a lucky omen for EF Core against Degerfors. So very excited. I know you're about going out there. You're going with all the gear, NFP, press pass credentials, the lot. There's going to be a bunch of not secret recordings. You're going to be hopefully getting some interviews done. Who knows? But most importantly, you're going to go out there and witness, these teams in the flesh. Live football. I'm sure you're looking forward to it very much.
Yeah, if anyone's in Gothenburg and listen to the show, if you're here this week, then give me a shout. I'm up for a coffee. I'm up for a beer. We had a good response, actually. I've been invited to, I think, a pre-match party for the Häcken game against Diff. So I have no idea where it is, but I'm going to try and find it. And I've connected with a couple of people, actually, who DM me. So that's great. And if you want to, Twitter at JFFootballFUTBR, I'll be about. Really looking forward to Häcken, Djurgården. Obviously, that's going to be a massive game. Djurgården not really having a great season. We haven't talked about them much. I don't think we're going to talk about them much this week either, because there's not much to write home about, beaten by Degerfors. But EF Core, Degerfors, I watched the EF Core Norrköping game and it was a 1-1 draw. I've got a sneaky feeling I might be there for their first win of the season. So, who knows? But could be, like you say, a lucky omen. And for the Häcken game, I'm really looking forward to seeing some of their talents. Like you say, maybe it's a 2-horse race. They looking strong. They've had a few injuries, but they've still dealt with them. They've had Gustafsson out injured, they've had Sadiq out injured, and they're still kind of pulling up other talents that can come in. Udenas has been on good form. So, yeah, I think that's going to be a really exciting game. And let's see, can they handle playing a bit, another big boy, because they were quite good in the big games last year. So let's see if they can continue that. I know that the manager was away. I think he was ill for a couple of games. So he wasn't even on the touchline, but they're still keeping that form. But yeah, I'm really excited. Obviously, you've got that, pre-travel nerves and all that. But once I'm on the plane and out there, I'm quite looking forward to getting back to Gothenburg. It's been many a year.
I think I need a couple of stiff drinks before I go on a plane, Jonathan. I'm a bit of a Dennis Bergkamp down the years, although I am back in the air this summer. So hopefully I can kick on from that run and get myself out of Scandinavia myself, either back into this year or next year. But I'm really interested when you go out there, gauging the sort of mood in the city, the footballing city of Gothenburg, which is huge, of course, especially with the big traditional team, biggest supported team, EF Core, struggling so badly, and Häcken, defending champions, doing so well. And, some of their other big teams down there, I think Super Etten these days. So I'm really interested to see how, the mood of the city, footballing wise. It's going to be maybe even a different dynamic compared to when you were last there.
Oh, the dynamics completely changed. I mean, the whole city's been flipped upside down. Häcken are the champions of Sweden. I mean, that's like, if you told me that 6 years, well, we had the interview with his former sporting director, Sonny Carson, and he said that, that the aim is to win the league, but no one really believed it. If you'd told me when we started this podcast, how can the next time I go back to Gothenburg, how can we be champions? And EF Göteborg will be in the relegation zone, I'd have probably laughed in your face. But really, that's the trajectory of the two teams. It's been earned on merit. Häcken have been phenomenal this last few years, and EF Göteborg haven't. At the end of the day, they've just announced a new technical director, I believe, who will come in now. There's a lot of talk about Stefan Billborn maybe being the next manager. So someone from your turf. I know he's previously at Hammarby, but he's quite strongly linked now to the manager's job. So there's again, it's all changed in the city of Gothenburg, and I will be interested to gauge the mood. I know for a fact that Häcken, everybody knows that they're dancing. That they didn't expect to win the league, and they're justifying it this season. They've still looked really good this year. They don't look like they're just a one season wonder. And although Malmö are now starting to look like really strong, Häcken will give them a bit of a title challenge. So, and as for EF Core, as I say, haven't won a game yet. This was the first goal they've scored all year in this game against Norrköping. So, they really have been struggling, and I'm expecting it to be a totally different mood. But EF Core ultimately, they do have that kind of backing behind them. I think I saw there's about 14,000 tickets sold for this game against Degerfors. So should be a good atmosphere in a midweek game. I'm really excited to be attended.
Yeah, and I'm excited for you out there. I wish you the safest of travels. Hope you enjoy yourself out there. You belt out the EF Core anthem when it comes going. It's about the only thing you've got to cheer at the moment. Are you in the cop end at EF Core, or are you on the sideline?
I'm in the scouts area, my friend.
I thought you would be. But you can get some good footage in there. And I say,
I'll be taking notes. We've got one of our 10 to watch will be playing, so I'll be without revealing our 10 to watch this year. There's one player that will I'll be taking notes on. So get on that Patreon.com, and you can see who it is.
Let's move to another city, Stockholm. And fair to say, none of their teams right now in Allsvenskan are doing particularly well. Although shout out to Brommapojkarna, which is in that region, isn't it? 2 wins in a row for them. But Djurgården 7 points, Hammarby 6, AIK in the relegation zone right now. I mean, I know you got plenty to say about AIK, but let's just first of all start with Hammarby, because they've lost now. They've lost 3 games, all away from home, all what you class as really big games. Häcken 3-1. We talked about that. They lost in the derby to AIK 2-0, and then they've lost 4-2 to Malmö. Okay, on their own 3 defeats, which they're not shocking places to lose. But I've got a feeling, I think you've been a bit disappointed with their performances, haven't you? In those games, you think, there's some people saying this season, can they take that step up and really challenge these teams in the massive games? At the moment, they've fallen short massively, and defensively has been the big problem.
Well, yeah, if you look at Stockholm, it's not great at the moment, really. They're struggling. I mean, AIK haven't had a good, really recent run of form. Interestingly enough, both Hammarby and AIK are top 3 in the list of ball possession in the league. So they're sort of retaining the ball, but they're just leaking goals, and they're not really looking great from that point of view. Hammarby have got the second worst XG in the league, and they've already conceded 10. And if you really, in pre-season, I wasn't convinced by them. I think the balance of the squad is just a little bit. It feels like a year too early. Cifuentes, in his comments after the match against Malmö, said that this is a project and he wants to stick around, and he was like saying, judge us in November. And that's what I said in the pre-season show with Hammarby, that it is a project, and it feels a bit like they're driven by sales rather than really performances. And I feel like they're a little bit sort of wet behind the ears at this team at the moment. They're a bit too much youth, maybe. And not maybe enough experience. Basara missed the game, of course. I think a lot of Allsvenskan fantasy players will be disappointed with that one. He had a bit of an injury, and they're currently 8th in the table. You look at K, as you say, 1 win. Their issues also come down to recruitment, in my opinion. They've bought the wrong players. Their manager has really, I think there's brewing player unrest there. If I'm being honest, Victor Fischer hasn't been a good signing. reportedly couldn't play on certain pitches and maybe artificial surfaces. He's been a big money move and hasn't really done much. Jimmy Durmaz, he's come with a big reputation, and there's been a lot of post-match press conference comments about those players from the manager. And, you know, Steve, this is maybe a case of sometimes do you get a manager where, is it a bit David Moyes at Manchester United, where you've got massive players, but a manager that is maybe a little bit inexperienced at actually dealing with such a big club? Now, no disrespect to him, I think he's good, but I've got to be honest, I see a little bit of a glazed look in his eyes in the press conferences. He just, like, the media are sort of picking at this club, AIK, at the moment. There's a lot of questions about their transfers, why have they signed certain players, agent fees, why are they paying sort of various agents this money? And I just feel like he hasn't got a grip on the whole club yet as an organisation. And a lot of the questions are about the recruitment. You know, why aren't you playing Durmaz? Why aren't you playing Fisher? Why aren't you playing? And then the players themselves make a comment saying, like, I'm not happy not playing. And when that happens, Steve, that player unrest, you're in a bit of trouble, really. Obviously, they got a draw against Sirius, finally got a clean sheet. And of course, they won the Stockholm derby, which was a massive win for them. And they needed that result, really. But losing to Vålerenga, of course, losing at home to Norrköping, losing to Halmstad, just feel like the club is a little bit, you know, Guidetti's back, which is really good for them. And I do expect their form to pick up. But, you know, even if you look at the bench, Steve, against Sirius, you've got Fisher on the bench, came on at half time. You know, you've got Farage, who's got a sort of big reputation behind him. He came from Levante. You've got Durmaz, as I mentioned, came on for 3 minutes. You know, some big money player like that's coming in for 3 minutes. It's not a good sign of recruitment, is it? So my gut feeling with these two clubs is they've got the recruitment not exactly spot on in the winter, and I think they're paying for it at this moment in time, and I think they've got work to do in the summer window. So I think for both of them, it's a case of, can you get to summer? I mean, Steve, just before we move on, I read a comment earlier saying that Antonio Cholak's made available by Rangers. Now, if I'm AIK or Hammarby, I'm battering that door down. If I'm Hammarby, I'm walking to Scotland to get Cholak, because that is exactly what Hammarby need right now. It's an absolute no-brainer from my point of view. Both of those clubs should do anything they can to sign him. That's the kind of player they need.
Yeah, so difficult times for both them teams. Just before we go, I do want to give a shout out to the couple of leaders in the fantasy leagues that we've got going in Eliteserien Fantasy All-Stars. Dylan B leads the way with maximal auteur on 335 points each. Over in Allsvenskan Fantasy, the wonderfully named team, Victor Moses Lawn from Ross Hewson. Lovely, 356 points there. You're doing quite well. You've got to be quite happy with your fantasy season so far. Jonathan, 18th in that league, 321 points, 11 clear of me, and sandwiched in between us, an old friend of the podcast, an old friend of me and you, Sam Hart on 312 points. It's just like the old days looking at that league table, mate.
Yeah, and I've had a decent start, but you're definitely on my coattails, and who knows, I might be seeing Sam Hart. So watch this space. I might see him in Gothenburg. But yeah, just before we actually go as well, I mean, fantasy, I think you've got to have Keith Tell at the moment. He's been my captain since day one, and he's doing quite well. Not since day one actually, but he's been my captain recently. But we've got a ton of questions, Steve. I just want to say a massive thank you to everyone on Twitter, because it would take you about a minute to go through our mentions today, Steve. Actually, we had so many comments. Like I was looking for that comment from Malmö about Nalic, from the Malmö supporter, and I've been scrolling for about a minute trying to find it, because we've had so many comments today, so many questions. There's one about Aker Adams and his ability. That's just coming from Joe Reed Scout. So unfortunately, if you're listening to this now, sorry we weren't able to get to it. There's a ton of questions we haven't been able to get to, basically. But yeah, just wanted to say a massive thank you to everybody who's supported us on Twitter recently, because I think we've added about 600 followers in about 3 weeks. So yeah, thank you to everybody for all the questions. We'll try and get to some of them maybe next week, but if you don't get your question asked, then you can always tweet again. We'll of course answer them either on the Patreon show or on the next podcast that we do. So yeah, just wanted to touch on that as well.
Yeah, I've just looked actually.
There's so many if you look at it.
that has, even while we've been recording live, I mean, half of these questions have been added when we're recording live. I actually don't have access to the NFP Twitter on my current browser. For some reason, I got logged out of it and got deleted, so I need to add it back on my browser. I'm just looking on my phone now. Yeah, I mean, for those that we haven't answered, and we have hopefully answered some, even without mentioning the people here, but I'll do my best to answer the ones on Twitter, for the ones that have been about Norway that weren't touched upon. But yeah, I'd really appreciate all you guys getting in touch. I hope you've been enjoying the shows this year. I'm sure everyone's really enjoyed, that we're back here with a more regular update of recent times. But we've had a lot on our plate recently. Watch out for more content from Sweden, maybe directly this week. Certainly coming into next week as well. There's loads of action going on. We're heading right into the crunch of the Scandinavian seasons.
Yeah, and I will be trying to record as much as possible. So keep an eye on the Twitter and Nordic Football. We may have 1 or 2 exclusives, and also the YouTube channel, Nordic Football Podcast. Go and subscribe to that, because we're going to have more content on there this season. And just finally, to answer one question I've seen just on the timeline at Scooby Man, he says, "Is it?" Hopefully, I've answered the AOK question anyway. But in terms of will they struggle this whole season, I think the return of Guidetti is going to help them a lot. As I just mentioned, I think that they really need Guidetti, to be honest. And he's missed every game so far this season, apart from the one just recently played. So his return is going to be a massive boost. But it does raise questions about some of the other players, because Faraj can't get in the team. As I mentioned, there's 1 or 2 others who can't get in the team. And I think that's a bit of an issue with the squad management. So hopefully that answers your question there. But sorry to everyone that I couldn't answer the questions. I saw one from Wasson asking about EF Core. We'll answer that maybe after the Degerfors game.
Right. Okay. Well, that'll be a wrap for this episode then, Jonathan. Thanks anyone who listened. Appreciate you as always, my friend. Best of luck out there. Have a great time in Sweden this week, and I'm sure we'll chat again soon.
Yep, thanks a lot, everyone. And don't forget patreon.com/Nordic Football Podcast if you want the weekend preview shows, which we had one last week, of course, and weekly predictions and fantasy chat as well, more fantasy chat. And of course, Twitter at Nordic Football if you want to ask us a question. So yeah, thanks so much for all your support, and I'll see you out on the other side, Steve. I'll have a beer in your memory, mate. I'll be thinking about you when the anthem comes on.
You certainly will, mate. Well, take everyone. We'll see you again very soon. Goodbye for now.